Look at television, great recovery on Wall Street. The fact is there are 8 million more people in poverty under Mr. Reagan. 3 million more children. Now 15% of our nation in legal poverty, official poverty. By the end of this year, 34 million will become 41 million. Those at the base of the economy are getting poorer, becoming more desperate and more destitute every day. Well, why not give the good news, the Reagan-Bush team says. Talk about businesses that recovered. How many more people got more money now? But the master said, you shall be judged by how you treat the least of these. Not the wealthiest of these, the least of these. As long as babies are malnourished, as long as mothers cannot get prenatal care, as long as men and women able-bodied are jobless, as long as there are thousands standing in line to move up to the housing project, we must focus our campaign on those boats stuck at the bottom. When you deal with boats at the bottom, you cannot be just a kind of treader of water. You got to swim, you got to dive, and you got to dive deep. We must go for the boats stuck way down there, for there are treasures in those boats. There are no lights down there. You cannot judge the cargo of the boat based on color. You just hear children crying. You just hear mothers taking their babies to bed supperless at night. You just hear fathers' voices who've given up, put dope in their veins rather than hope in their brains because they've lost their way. You just hear voices crying out down there, reach me, help me. There are some voices you can't hear 50 stories high in a hotel. There are some voices you cannot hear flying high. That's why the master did not come from a mansion down. He came from a manger up. You need to hear the voices at the bottom of our economy. You need to know full well when you stay over there. I want some leaders and some media folks to go over there as well, because all the stereotypes would be destroyed. I stayed with Reverend and Mrs. Willie in the Bronx 2 nights ago. A husband and wife, grandparents, great-grandparents, 11 children, 50 grandchildren, a man with cancer of the body, yet he dares run up and down the street getting cheese to feed the hungry. He dares be the godfather, the highest and best sense of where he lives. No children on drugs. All trying to go to college or trade school looking for a way out. In every ghetto there's a combination of hope and hopelessness. More hope than hopelessness. Every time a church bell rings, that's a sign of hope. Every time a mother awakens in the morning and embraces her baby, it's a sign of hope. Every time a child is sent to school, whether he or she learns or not, it's a sign of hope. That ghetto has more hope than hopelessness. And somebody must provide a way out. Somebody must prove there's a bomb in Gilead. That family is stable. That family is Christian. That family is ambitious. They're in the slum, but the slum is not in them. Jesus was turned away from the end. He was born in the slum, but the slum was not born in him, you see. And so you live with and amongst the people to hear their cries, their groans and aches. Most poor folks are not on welfare. Most poor folks are too proud to apply for welfare. Most poor folks work every day. Sweeping streets, they work every day. Mopping hallways, they work every day. They empty bedpads in hospitals, they work every day. They clean other folks' house and cannot clean their own. They work every day. They raise other folks' children and cannot raise their own. They work every day. Somebody must argue the case of the poor, must defend the poor, and deliver the needy. Our mission is to keep focusing on the have-nots and the locked out. It's to tell the poor Santa Claus is unreal. Nobody is going to come by once a year and bring you a bag full of salvation on the way out. Nobody. Nobody. Poor folks, stop looking for Santa Claus to come from North Pole once a year. Nobody, including Santa Claus, will save the poor, for the poor, but the poor. And when the poor come together, they ain't poor anymore. You have the power to be more than what you are. You have the power. Redirect the course of our nation. You really have that power. As I stayed in the Bronx, here in Brooklyn last night, and in East Harlem, we need to give our children a new direction. And they go toward Honduras and to kill and be killed, that's the wrong direction. And they go toward Grenada to invade and kill and be killed, that's the wrong direction. They go toward Lebanon, a suicide mission, that's the wrong direction. There's another direction. We must train our youth. Train them to end the slums and rebuild America. Just give them just a little direction. When I look at life, because I've come from the bottom up, I'm what they call an eternal optimist. Because when you come from the bottom up, every round, every one of them gets higher and higher. And you're on your way up, everything counts. And so you might say half glass empty, I say half glass full. The weatherman said, well, it's half cloudy. I said, it's half sunny. There's another way out. So now I go to the slum, and I know there's a steamy side and there's a sunny side. The steamy side is a broken window. The sunny side trains some child to be a glazer. The steamy side, a missing brick, trains some child to be a mason. The steamy side, a missing door. The sunny side trains some child to be a carpenter. We must give our children a way out. Start preparing our boys to die abroad and train them to heal at home. Rebuild our nation. We can fight for apprenticeship training programs and open up these unions. Fight for vocational education, train our children to use their minds and their hands. And then we must have leadership that has the confidence and the ability to negotiate change. As president, I can negotiate with the Soviet Union. I have no fear of the power of our nation. I have no fear of my own ability to negotiate change and fight for new directions. We must confront in peace with ways out. So how can you negotiate with a superpower? I have for 42 years negotiated with a superpower. When we got public accommodations and snatched down the cotton curtain in the South, we negotiated with a superpower. We got the right to vote. We got it from a superpower. We got open housing from a superpower. We fought for the right to save our boys and bring them out of Vietnam. We did it with a superpower. Whenever you want to negotiate, I've done quite a bit of it. You find what another party is interested in. Work out a mutually beneficial proposition. Somebody say, well, you know, the Russians don't want to negotiate because they don't understand death like we do. That's not true. We ought to quit telling that lie. It's not true. They understand death real well. World War II, we lost about 500,000. They lost 22 million. They understand death real good. Mr. Andropov died. His wife walked up to the casket. She didn't start dancing. She started crying just like you do. They understand death just like you understand death. When their son walked up and saw his daddy lying there, he didn't pull out a gun and start shooting. He cried just like you cried. They understand death real well, except we're not talking to them, and they're not talking with us, and we're talking at each other and not with each other and making life more dangerous for everybody. Somebody must show a way out, break the cycle of pain and war and terror and choose the human race over the nuclear race. Say, yeah, we can kill each other, but we also can heal each other and educate each other and feed each other. There is a way out. There's another direction. I said to Mr. Hart and Mr. Mundell, all these talks about foreign policy, and they make it seem like foreign policy is so difficult for us to understand. Now, Reverend, you may know something about civil rights, but now when it comes to foreign policy, I mean, what you really know about foreign policy? My father came home, I was 3 or 4 years of age, coming home from the war, bringing me candy on his furlough. He had been on the foreign policy. You buy a Honda or Toyota, that's foreign policy. You buy a Sony or Panasonic, that's foreign policy. You pay taxes, you're financing foreign policy. As a matter of fact, we came here on a foreign policy. If you grow up on the seamy side of life, you learn to turn adversity into advantage. This idea about the country as great as ours and as strong, we won't talk with Castro. Castro shouldn't intimidate us. 90 miles from Florida, we're going to talk with Cuba through Nicaragua or through Angola. And that Castro is 90 miles south of Miami. Talk with him. Face him. Well, he's a communist. So is Russia, and so is China. talk with him. And if you believe in yourself and in your nation, our faith will not bow in the face of communism. Our nation will not bow in the face of communism. Leadership must talk and act and have courage and change things. We've allowed Castro to be more than what he is. He hears the nation. He got a point of view. But there is another way. They had foreign policy debates up at Harvard one night, 8 candidates running, hour and a half debate. Great learned philosophers asked them questions, and candidates asked them, and all of that. Went through 2/3 of the debate, left out 3/4 of the world. They've been up here arguing about foreign policy among them and hard for a whole week. You thought the whole world was somewhere between Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. The fact of the matter is, there are 4 billion people in the world. 4 billion, half of them Asian, half of them Asian, and half of them Chinese. So if you don't count them, you left out half of the world. 1 of every 8 human beings is African. 1/4 of them Nigerian. Our neighbors next door, South Central Latin America, speak Spanish and Portuguese. Most folks in the world, America is just 6%. Most folks in the world are black, are brown, are yellow, non-Christian, poor, and don't speak English. The world, the real world. Now I'm going to say that, I think I better say that again. Most folks in the world are black, are brown, are yellow, non-Christian, don't speak English, and poor. We can relate to them, but we must count them. We must measure human rights by 1 yardstick or by a golden rule. Treat folk as you would have them treat you. In the Middle East, there's tension. Well, we aggravate the tension by not talking, not thinking. I was saying earlier today, if I'm in trouble with an enemy, please show your love for me by getting my enemy off my back. That's how you do it. You know we can convince the Arab nations it makes more sense to trade with Israel than to fight with Israel if we try. There's more future for all parties involved, but leadership must convene and talk and act and make things happen. Jewish people cannot understand the suffering and agony of the Palestinians. They don't have enough regard for the pain and agony of the Jewish people. Both are bruised, both are hurt. There's a cycle of pain that goes round and round and round. We need leadership to break the cycle of pain. So there's a way out. There is a way out. Yeah, there's a way out. Yes, there is a way out. Lastly, I challenge the leaders to expand their worldview, include North and South, as well as East and West. I challenge them to include Asia, Africa, the Caribbean, the Central Americas in their worldview. Our nation needs more than a new president. It needs a new direction. I say this in a close. The Lord has been real good to us. He has brought us up the rough side of the mountain. So far, we've not been able to buy any newspaper ads or TV commercials. I hope we can one day, but in the meantime, He'll give you what you need. He'll supply your every need. A poor campaign and a rich message. Its time has come. Every day we're getting stronger and stronger. 20 to 25% of those who vote for me have never voted before. We're moving up. We've won about 14 congressional districts across the South, previously held by Bo Weevils. We're going to change the face of American politics. Reagan won. Reagan won 8 southern states by 182,000 votes, with over 3 million blacks unregistered. We've already put more than 250,000 on the books in those same states. We're changing the face of American politics. He got 182,000 vote margin in 8 states. We got 360,000 votes in Florida, Georgia, and Alabama alone. We're moving on up. Our confidence is growing, and therefore our votes are growing. We didn't know ourselves for the law that qualified us to do. We won South Carolina over Mondale and Hart 2-1. It's significant that the South Carolina State Executive Committee, the Democratic Party, endorsed me to be that state's favorite son. Something is going on. In Arkansas, where Governor Forbes and Ernie Green and Daisy Bates were in confrontation in 1957, that same Oliver Forbes was on the telephone with me, and Ernie Green and Mrs. Bates expressed his appreciation of this campaign and gave his letter of support. The lions are lying down with the lambs. Something is going on. We lost Arkansas by 400 votes. There's a change taking place. We won Virginia. There's a change taking place. Well, New York, Chicago answered its call. Atlanta answered its call. Philadelphia answered its call. Now New York, not too long from now, your time has come. You must answer your call. On this note, I leave you now. Not too long ago, I heard on the December 4th morning that Lieutenant Robert Goodman had been shot down in Syria. I don't know why I was struck by the fact that he had gone down, and maybe I could do something about it. I prayed about it, talked with my pastor about it. I want to give peace a chance. God to work another miracle in our lives. I didn't know very much about Goodman. I heard about the Damascus Road. Reverend Sample, when I was a boy growing up in Greenville, told me one day that there's a road called the Damascus Road. God hangs around that road, and wherever God hangs around, great things take place. One day there was a man named Saul who had been a killer going down that road, and God knocked him from his vehicle, and he awakened and saw a great light. Well, there was a boy named Goodman going down that same road, a bombardier. Somehow his airplane was struck. His friend 6 inches from him was killed. He was made unconscious, as Paul was made unconscious. Apparently his head hit a button, and it ejected from the airplane. And when he awakened, he was in the arms of his enemies. They could have killed him, but they spared his life. Just as the people of Syria gave Paul a chance, and then God gave the world a chance. They gave Goodman a chance. That gave peace a chance. I went there and met with his leadership. They gave a hard argument why they couldn't let him go. I argued, you ought to let him go now. They said, well, we need him, because if we let him go, we'll demoralize our soldiers. We need him to prove other folks shouldn't fly here. I said, don't use him as a pawn in this war game. Have the courage to break the cycle of pain and end the terror. He said, well, your argument is strong. I must take it to higher sources. I met with President Assad. I said, Mr. Assad, do not use Mr. Goodman as a pawn in this game. It's a much bigger game. He can only rot in jail. He can only make bad matters worse. Don't talk at Reagan. Talk with him. You're a leader. Let's talk about this thing. He went on to explain all the Middle East problems. I said, well, but somebody got to have the courage to break the cycle of pain. He said, but you don't understand. I said, oh, yes, I also recall that there was another great leader in Damascus, long time ago, coming down that same road, and God spoke to him. God spoke to him. Lights came on where there was darkness. And the world has never been the same because somebody in Damascus gave peace a chance. You, Mr. Assad, you in a great tradition, give peace a chance. He said, well, he said, I can't make up my mind today. But he said, I'm almost persuaded. And I thought about Agrippa, who couldn't quite make up his mind and said, I was almost persuaded. I said, well, I hope that you become altogether persuaded and break the cycle of pain. And then the next day, when I arrived to meet with Mr. Kadam, we got the glad news that Mr. Goodman would be let free. My mind reflected as I traveled back across the oceans to home, and I arrived and the press was there and the cameras was rolling and popping, and enemies saying you did it for an ulterior motive and just trying to embarrass Mr. Reagan, and others said we don't know what went down and we don't know what went down. I said, well, he's home. They said, well, but explain what happened. I said, I can't explain what happened. And they kept arguing and saying, but we know he's home and that's good, but explain. I said, well, I'll tell you, it reminded me, they kept saying, I said, it reminds me, God, when Jesus healed the blind man one Sunday. And folks are more upset about the day it took place on than the fact that the blind man could see. And everybody was upset about the blind man having sight except the blind man. And everybody was upset about Goodman getting home except Goodman. He didn't change words. He came right on home. When I was a little young, I heard him say, well, you know, Jesus healed the blind man, and they were ungrateful. Said, blind man didn't even stay around long enough to say thank you. But he wasn't ungrateful. I found out what happened. So he was blind, but he could hear. He'd been hanging around that place for a long time, just listening to folks argue about nothing. And so he knew if he stood around there long enough, they might have a vote and vote him back into blindness. He didn't mean no harm. He just went on down the street looking. Now the Pharisees, they were upset because they wanted the law. They didn't want sight. The Sadducees, they were upset. And the judges, they got upset. The politicians, you start moving lots of folks, the politicians get upset. The scribes, they got mad because they wanted to be off on Sunday. But here was a world news story breaking on. A blind man could see it. And finally, they say, well, the Pharisees here and the Sadducees here and judges here. And where's the blind? They said, blind man gone. And they went down the street, and they finally caught up with the blind man. And I tell you, once God gives you sight, don't you hang around arguing. If God gives you a way out, don't hang around. If you figure out some way to end the war, don't hang around arguing. If you figure out some way to end these slums, don't hang around arguing. You figure out some way to get this nuclear missile that's about to come into New York out of here. Don't hang around arguing. If God gives you insight, you go on down the road. And they finally called him, and they say, blind man, say, you can see now. He said, yes. They say, but the guy Jesus, what about him? He said, well, I don't know very much about him. Of course, I'd never seen him before. I'd heard a few things about him. They say, well, blind man, give us some kind of profile on this man. I mean, you think Jesus had some ego drive? I mean, you think that he was motivated politically? I don't know very much about Jesus. You know, I couldn't read nothing about him because You know, I've been blind up to a few minutes ago, and I don't know what's going on. They said, but blind man, you must give some statement. You must explain what happened. So I can't explain it. I can't. They said, but you got to say something. He said, well, all I know for the record is that I once was lost, and now I'm found. I once was blind, but now I see. Thank God. Thank God. Thank God. Now we see.